Okay, hello everyone. My name is Seth Chloe Paring, and this is my reflection video on the chosen movie that we watched to commemorate the declaration of martial law. And for this video reflection, I will start with a little introduction. Over the years, we have seen martial law to be commemorated as a way to never forget about the abuses and atrocities committed by the Marcos regime. In today's generation, of course, we weren't alive at that time to witness that, yet Filipinos have created a way to keep this event into surface so that we may never bury the cruelty of the past. For this review, we will set our eyes on the film Barber'S Tales, a movie set during martial law that not only depicts the fate of the people who are opposed to the dictatorship, but also sheds a bright light on the oppression faced heavily by women. Here tells a story of a woman named Marilu, who was first introduced as a wife of a barber, turned into a widow of the said barber, but then takes over his business once her talent was noticed by the town's priest. However, as her business takes over, she also gets mixed up in a political revolt. The film shows that martial law was not only a political event but also a social one, because it was affecting the lives of ordinary Filipinos, from daily inspection, soldiers being feared by the people, and just by the consistent tells of the soldiers that rebels were nothing but trouble. Unlike other depictions that focus solely on the violence that was faced by the activists, Barber'S Tales is unique in a way that it kind of tells the story from the perspective of a woman named Marilu, who had no initial involvement of politics, but was gradually drawn into it because of circumstance, community, and her growing awareness of injustice. It reminds us that history was not just shaped by politicians or rebels, but also by everyday people who were simply just, trying to survive. After I've read Professor Nicanor's 4 Values of Cinema and watched Barber'S Tales, Professor Nicanor kind of guided me into understanding Filipino films beyond their entertainment value. The values of mabuti ang inaapi and maganda pa ang daigdig were kind of the values that mostly outstood to me while watching the movie Barber'S Tales. The value of mabuti ang inaapi shows us that goodness is often found in those who are oppressed. And in the film, Marilu symbolizes this. She was not powerful, nor does she seek out conflict, but she still becomes a victim of her circumstances. First is through her husband's death, and next is through even just her community, and finally by being caught in, a crossfire of political struggle. As I was watching the movie, I've observed Marilu to be very, very patient and very, very resilient, because if I were her, that husband is done for. But going back to the film, her oppression, however, does not, define her as weak. Instead, it kind of emphasized her moral strength and her ability to persevere despite her circumstances. This mirrors a Filipino cultural tendency to kind of side with the oppressed, to believe that those who suffer are usually the ones with the purest intentions. The other value that kind of outstood to me while watching the movie was yung value na maganda pa ang daigdig, which reflects optimism despite adversities in life. And even though the film portrays the cruelty of martial law and the very cruel oppression faced by women, there were scenes that shows the human spirit rising above hardships, like the friendship between Marilu and the other women in the community, and her quiet determination to continue barbering despite criticism na you're a woman, you're not supposed to do that. These events were kind of what balanced my emotions throughout watching the movie, because as sad as the realities were being portrayed in that movie, napakita din nila yung kultura ng Pilipino na makisama, na mag-adapt, and yung bayanihan na ngayon na-experience pa rin and ginagawa pa rin ng mga Pilipino. Next is on to the scene that stood out to me throughout the movie. I really loved it that in the last scene it was shown that all of the women cut their hair in order to help Marilu escape from the soldiers who were hunting her down. And this was just, for me, a powerful move. For me, being a woman, hair is one of the key factors in order to, maintain my look, my appearance. Well, not in a way that I abide in the standards of normalcy when it comes to beauty, but I love my hair. It makes me feminine. It's part of the factors that shouts women for me. And onto that scene where everyone took out their veil, revealing that they all have the same cut as Marilu, moved me because it showed how women working together could make such a big impact. It was an act of protecting their own, protecting Filipinos, protecting their people, who is also aiming to protect their rights as Filipinos. It was the very culture of bayanihan. And even though they weren't technically rebelling against the Marcos regime or rebelling against the government, it hinted that they were willing to help people to fight for their rights. When we look at Barber's Tales today, it feels hauntingly relevant or prevalent in today's issues because it raises abuse of power, silencing the dissent, and gender inequality still being present till this day. It's still present in our society. Like, for example, in recent years, we have seen the spread of misinformation on social media that tries to revise the history of martial law, and for me, can be very dangerous because it erases the experiences of people like Marilu, whose suffering and courage shaped our democratic freedoms and helped gain the freedom that we have today. And to continue this, women continue to face marginalization, sadly. Although, I can admit that there has been a little progress, we still see instances where women's voices are dismissed or ridiculed, whether in politics, media, or everyday life. You can see this even in the presidential candidacy of Lenny versus BBM. I have seen a lot of even women being interviewed that Lenny isn't deserving to be the president because she is a woman and she somehow cannot lead. It's sad to see that that idea is still not progressive to this day, because a lot of women, every woman, has been fighting their rights to show that we are more than what you think we are. And with that aggression, I am just really, really thankful that creative people out there, like the director of Barber's Tales, continue to make films like these to kind of act as cultural tools to resist forgetting what we once experienced and to fight what we continue to experience to this day. They remind us that forgetting is not just about looking back, but also about guarding the present against repeating the same mistakes. Not just as a communication student, but also a student in general, I recognize that stories shape memory and memories shape identity. It shapes who we are today. And in Barber's Tales, it is an example of how storytelling can resist oppression, because it centers the voices of those who were marginalized and often left out in history books. It shows us the stories of those Filipinos who, even though weren't as recognized and are probably forgotten, they were a part of the building foundation of how we fought against the dictatorship that we once experienced. And personally, I believed my contribution as, a future communicator or an advocate now is to continue telling these stories, whether it's through film or through articles, prevalently through social media content or other platforms. It's telling our story is not just about, creativity. It is about also having the responsibility to keep on resurfacing what we once experienced. Because if we stop telling these stories about martial law, they will be replaced by lies and distortions. Or maybe, maybe even erased by history or erased through time. As I end this reflection video, Barber'S Tales is not just a film about one woman's journey during martial law. It is about the resilience that us Filipinos have despite the brutal things that we've experienced. It is our a culture na makisama, our culture to help each other even in times that we may also be in danger, that our safety may also be of threat. And I hope that the ways in which we try to remember the martial law will not only be an article, will not only be a movie that we can watch or a book we can read, but something that can shape our minds into further fighting for our human rights, to further fight against the imbalance that the government has been placing under us. I hope that the many generations to further continue will keep this memory alive, because I don't ever want to forget, and I don't ever want the Filipinos to forget.